Today in Legally Yes, Prince Harry is headed to trial and Heather Gay is sued by her co-star over botched injections. Plus, Keke Palmer is granted a temporary restraining order while Robert De Niro loses in court. We got that plus so much more on today's Legally Yes. Everyone, and welcome to Legally Yes. I'm Christina. That's, of course, Neama Rahmani, President and CEO of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Hi, Neama. How are you?
Doing great, Christina. How about you?
Doing good. We have a lot to get to, as always. So let's kick it off with Prince Harry. We've been talking about this for quite some time. So a lawsuit by Prince Harry, Elton John, and 5 other public figures accusing a newspaper publisher of using private detectives and listening devices to illegally snoop on them is going to a full trial. So Judge Matthew Nicklin rejected a bid by the publishers of the Daily Mail to dismiss the case without trial, saying defense lawyers had not delivered a knockout blow to the claims. So obviously this is a big win for Harry. He's wanted this to go to trial. But so why did the judge rule in his favor?
So the Daily Mail and the other publishers, they tried to get the case dismissed on statute of limitations grounds, saying that, this conduct occurred a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, and that it was too late. The judge rejected that argument, and Harry's going to be able to move forward with this lawsuit. And we know that not many cases go to trial. Most of them settle, but this is one that we're definitely going to see tried.
Yeah, definitely. And do you foresee Harry and maybe these other celebrities having to take the stand in this trial as well?
I think so, because even if they can establish liability and all this illegal spying happened, they still have to prove their damages. That's how much they were harmed. So Harry, Elton John, and the other celebrities that were affected will have to take the stand, and it's going to be interesting testimony, to say the least.
It definitely will. So, is Harry looking for monetary damages? Is he just looking to prove a point? He's not the only celebrity involved in this, but what do you foresee the outcome to be in this situation?
Well, Christina, sometimes lawsuits are about money, but this one is personal for Harry. I think he still blames the British tabloids for the death of Princess Diana. And frankly, he doesn't like them, and he's going to try to inflict as much pain as possible. That's why he's going to push this case to trial. Frankly, he might even donate whatever money he receives to charity, but I don't think this is a moneymaker for the prince. This is about sending a message and pursuing justice on behalf of himself and his family.
Definitely. All right, moving on over to Housewives news. It's our Housewives legal story of the week. So according to paperwork obtained by Us Weekly, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City star Heather Gay and Monica Garcia have been in an ongoing legal battle since August, with Monica alleging that she got botched cosmetic procedures from Heather's beauty lab and laser company. So Beauty Lab and Laser Company initially sued Monica for breach of contract and breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealing after she allegedly failed to pay about $2,500 for past cosmetic procedures despite signing a contract in December of 2019. So they indicate that Monica paid the initial $449 but failed to complete her remaining monthly payments. Beauty Lab alleged that the business suffered and continues to suffer significant losses and damages because of Monica's lack of payment. The company is seeking not less than $2,000. So she went on to file a countersuit in September, but it was amended on November 7th. She claimed that she received defective negligency given injections, which did not have the intended promised result, which is why she failed to make the payments. Heather said this lawsuit has zero merit and unfortunately is a pattern of behavior from a desperate woman who, when unable to pay her bills, lashes out to avoid accountability. So does this lawsuit have any merit?
Oh, those housewives, Christina. Now they're suing each other. So,
yes.
It started with a breach of contract case, right? Heather says Monica owes her about $2,000 in unpaid medical bills. And then Monica countersuits alleging medical negligence. I think I'm probably going to have to side with Heather on this one, and this is why. Regardless of what type of medical procedure you have, injections, filler, Botox, usually there's some informed consent. You discuss the risks with your doctor or your medical practitioner, and you agree to proceed notwithstanding the risks. We all know that cosmetic surgery and different types of injections, they're not guaranteed. And I bet you there is an agreement, and there's some fine print where Monica acknowledged all this. And I think she's still going to be on the hook for paying the medical bills that she owes.
Right. So they're seeking damages not less than $2,000. So will she have to pay like interest on some of these payments at this point as well? Because she owes about $2,000 left in what she owes, but is she going to have to pay even more for this?
Potentially, yes. This is one of those areas where the contract is going to control. Let's say there's an interest provision or potentially even an attorney fees provision to enforce the agreement or to go after any unpaid medical bills. Monica may be on the hook for even more than the $2,000 if there's a specific provision in their agreement that calls for it.
Right. If she can prove that she had these botched injections and things like that, does that change anything, or is a contract and you have to pay for it?
Well, it would be with the offset, so she would still potentially owe the $2,000 unless she can say that the medical provider breached. But if she can't prove medical negligence, her claim is going to be worth a lot more than $2,000. Botched, medical procedures on your face, they can be worth tens, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars if it can affect her career going forward. So again, pretty tough legal hurdle to overcome. But if she does get there and does prove medical negligence, medical malpractice, then her case is going to be worth a lot more than $2,000.
All right, moving on over. This is actually a sad story. So switching gears, definitely. So Keke Palmer's request for a temporary restraining order against ex Darius Jackson and temporary sole custody of their 8-month-old son has been granted. So the court ordered Jackson to stay 100 yards away from both Keke and their infant son until further notice. He's also prohibited from having visitation rights at this time. So Us Weekly previously confirmed that Keke filed a petition on November 9th, claiming she has security footage from an incident earlier this month in which Jackson trespassed into her home and threatened her. He allegedly ended up lunging toward her, striking her before throwing her over a couch. In the legal documents, Keke alleged many instances of physical violence took place throughout her 2-year relationship with him, and she confirmed that she ended her relationship in October due to the physical and emotional abuse inflicted by him. He has denied the allegations, claiming that actually Keke's mother threatened to put a bullet in his head. Parents are getting involved. This is an extremely messy and scary situation. So going back to temporary restraining orders, which we've talked about on this show before, but how long do they usually last for? And what is the next step in this process?
So going back to our Vanderpump discussions, a temporary restraining order usually lasts a few weeks, just enough time for there to be a permanent restraining order hearing. And at that permanent hearing, assuming both parties show up, they'll present evidence, including witnesses, and the judge will have to decide on a permanent restraining order. That could last years, at least in California, it lasts up to 5 years. So what the judge does in a temporary restraining order situation is essentially keep things at bay, the status quo, until the lawyers can get their witnesses lined up for that mini trial and the permanent restraining order hearing.
Since it appears she may have evidence, do you see this becoming a permanent restraining order situation?
I think so. Now, a temporary restraining order oftentimes is heard ex parte, which means one party goes in, they don't hear evidence from the other side. So, I mean, again, we saw that with, the folks involved in Vanderpump when they were able to get the temporary restraining order, in that case, not the permanent. But I will say this, judges usually are hesitant to grant temporary restraining orders in family law situations because sometimes people misuse them to gain leverage in a custody situation or in a divorce proceeding. But when a judge grants a temporary restraining order and tells Darius, hey, you can't see Keke, you can't see your kid, that means that Keke likely has some pretty significant and compelling evidence. Obviously, video doesn't lie. We haven't seen the video, but I think that Keke has the upper hand here because she was able to get that temporary restraining order and prevent the father of her child from seeing the child.
I mean, then what is his kind of line of defense? And if he is granted, or if she's granted a permanent restraining order, how does that affect his visitation rights with his child?
It's going to be very difficult. He might have no visitation at all or monitored visitation, which means he might be able to see his son for a short period of time, maybe once a week or twice a week, but there might have to be a monitor there. So this is something that's very serious. Obviously, whenever there's violence and kids involved, I'm not saying that Keke's allegations are true, but this is something that courts take very seriously. And there's the possibility that he loses custody. Now, of course, when he comes to the restraining order, he's going to say that there was no violence or threat of violence, or in fact, it was Keke who was the aggressor. So we'll see what sort of evidence he can put on. But so far, he's behind, and there's the really real possibility that he's not going to see his child for quite some time.
Yeah, no, definitely. Such a sad situation. All right, moving on over to Robert De Niro. His company, Canal Productions, was found liable for gender discrimination and retaliation against his former longtime personal assistant, Graham Chase Robinson, in the pair's civil trial. So a jury in New York City's federal court ordered Canal, which the actor formed to look after his business and personal needs, to pay Robinson more than $1.26 million in damages. Now, Robert De Niro is to make the payments in 2 installments of about $630,000. However, they did not find him personally liable. So during the 2-week trial, he admitted on the stand that he berated Robinson and likely called her a petulant, snippy, and effing spoiled brat, but he denied screaming at her. So she began working at Canal in 2008, acted as a vice president of production and finance, and which allowed her to sign off on expenses without approval before she abruptly left in 2019. They then filed a $3 million lawsuit against her that August for allegedly misusing and misappropriating funds. 2 months later, she returned the favor with a $12 million lawsuit citing workplace and sexual harassment as well as sexism. Were you surprised by the outcome of this trial?
Christina, I was. And the reason I'm surprised is this is what we call a mixed verdict or an inconsistent verdict, because obviously there's claims on both sides, and the jury found that De Niro's production company was liable, but he personally was not. But, these entertainers, what they'll do is create companies, can be corporations or LLCs, where they're the sole shareholder or the sole member. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to why the production company would be liable, but De Niro not. But here's what my guess is what the jury was trying to do. They wanted to pay Robinson for essentially 4 years of wages since she's been out of work. And that's sort of how we get to that $1.2 million number. But they didn't find necessary that De Niro committed gender discrimination. Obviously, this was a very interesting case. De Niro would call her all the time, ask her to scratch his back, all sorts of really strange and bizarre allegations. There was yelling in the courtroom. De Niro's daughter was text messaging. The assistant and his girlfriend was involved. So there was a lot going on. But I think the jurors, what they said was, listen, this is someone who was unlawfully terminated. We're going to pay her for a few years of back wages, but we don't necessarily agree that there was any discrimination going on.
So this was technically then a win for De Niro, you think?
Well, it's hard to say because, Robinson was asking for $12 million. There would have been a $3 million offset. So technically, if you look at the numbers, I mean, she could have gotten, an 8-figure judgment, potentially more. So this is a win, I would say, for De Niro because he wasn't held personally liable, but he's going to be the one writing that check. And I guess he limited his exposure to $1.2 million, which is about 10% of what the plaintiff was asking for. But again, I think this was a sort of a mixed result. Both sides are claiming victory here. And I think the jurors might have split the baby on this one.
Yeah. And like you said before, even though he's not personally liable, but on the stand, he did admit to berating her. So it kind of just doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I think the jurors wanted to give her something, but not the full amount. And you never know what a jury is going to do, Christina. That's why we always say it's always a roll of the dice when you push a case to jury trial.
Definitely is. Well, Neama, thank you so much as always.
Thanks, Christina. See you next week.
See you next week. For more news, content, and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.